Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
District Attorney Frederick Agee tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Frederick Agee. He's the Republican District Attorney for Haywood, Gibson, and Crockett counties. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Along with Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. We had you on in part. You this past week wrote a column for us at the Daily Memphian, very much talking about, in many ways, a defense of Steve Mulroy, a Democrat under fire from some quarters and some politicians right now, the district attorney for Shelby County. And we'll go through some of that column. We also want to talk about your role in your counties and what that's like. And you also recently were, because they had to bring in an outside DA, you prosecuted the case against Judge Melissa Boyd, one of the Shelby County criminal judges. So we got lots to talk about.
And maybe not enough time to
get there, but we'll try.
All of it,
we'll try. So we really appreciate you being here. Again, I want to just kind of do a little bit of your bio, because obviously a lot of folks in Memphis and Shelby County maybe aren't familiar with you, but you're Republican. You've been in office, what now?
Almost 4 years. 4 years.
You're a major in the U.S. Army Reserve, 20 years in the military, tours all around the world. You're a strong Second Amendment supporter, but also this avid defender of Steve Mulroy. And maybe do a quick snapshot of why you came out and said, hey, I want to defend Steve Mulroy on what he's doing in Shelby County, and then we'll go deeper into all of it. Give me the kind of 30-second snapshot of what your case is.
I would also like to say I'm the only, because I'm proud of this, I'm the only elected DA in Tennessee who actually still serves in the military.
Good.
We do have some veterans, a small pool of veterans in the DA's conference, but I'm the only one who's active in a military component right now. Steve, I've gotten to know him over the last 2 years. We're in the West Tennessee Drug Task Force together. I've sort of, watched from the outside of what he's trying to do. And I think it's very unfortunate that I don't feel like he's been given a fair chance. He's barely even been in office for 2 years. I know the kind of prosecutors that they have in that office. They have career prosecutors, people that have dedicated their life to public service. And I believe if given enough time, he will right the ship. I mean, day one, he had over 300 murders pending in that office. Day one, the day he stepped foot. And that doesn't even include the amount of murders in Memphis and Shelby County that have not been closed out. I mean, no offense, I don't mean any disrespect to the Memphis Police Department, but they have an abysmal closeout rate. I believe it's less than 30% on violent crime. I don't know if it's improved any, but that was the last stat I had seen. So if we're not closing out murder cases, that means, or rape cases, that means we've got murderers and rapists still in our community.
And so many things to talk about. Is Steve, I mean, again, people reading your bio, right, would think, well, this is a tough on crime guy. I mean, Frederick Agee, super tough on crime. Do you think of Steve Mulroy as tough on crime?
I believe Steve is focused on allocating his resources where they're needed the most, and that is on violent crime. And with only 9 criminal court judges, only so many days you have per year to get a case to trial. There's only so many working days in a year. And if you're adding, how many ever murders you're adding per month, hundreds per year, potentially, the ones that actually get charged and get prosecuted, it puts a lot of pressure on their office, because you may not get a murder case to trial 4, 5, 6 years down the road because of the amount of time, preparation it takes to be able to get a case to trial and also to be able to try that case.
Let me bring in Bill Dries.
So the discussion here has basically been this from Brent Taylor, who's a state senator here, who is one of the people who's in front of this drive to oust Steve Mulroy as DA. He's basically said, look, the legislature passes laws and this prosecutor has said his office is not going to prioritize certain things while prioritizing other areas on that. What do you say to that argument that the legislature passes laws, the prosecutors have to follow those laws?
Well, we do. We take an oath to uphold the state constitution and the U.S. Constitution. However, we do have prosecutorial discretion. Again, we have to decide where our resources should be used. We have to prioritize our resources because we don't have an infinite amount of resources. We don't have, enough judges. I'm saying, even in my district, one of the things I have, what I'm working on is trying to efficiently close out cases where victims aren't waiting 4, 5, 6 years for their case to be heard. We actually need another trial judge in our district just to be able to get cases to trial quicker. But I would say to Senator Taylor, and I don't mean any disrespect to Senator Taylor, we appreciate his public service, but he's not an attorney. He's never been a prosecutor. He's never evaluated a case. He's never had to take a case to trial. These things this is serious business. I said in the article, being a Shelby County prosecutor is not for the faint of heart. And when you try a case as a prosecutor, you typically only get one shot. So you're either going to get a conviction, you're either going to get a not guilty or a hung jury. If you get a hung jury, you got to decide whether or not you're going to retry the case again. And oh, by the way, you've got all these other murders that are still pending. I do believe Senator Taylor's heart is in the right place. I believe that he does want violent crime to be reduced here in Shelby County. But I've also questioned what his motives are. Because if I was Senator Taylor, I would say, hey, General Mulroy, what do you need? What can we provide you? One of the things he's asked for is a crime lab in Memphis.
That Steve Mulroy's asked for.
Yes, yeah. General Mulroy's asked for a crime lab. A few years ago, they moved the TBI crime lab out of Shelby County and moved it to Jackson. Well, Metro Nashville Police Department, they have their own crime lab. And that's one of the things Steve Mulroy's wanting to do, is he's wanting to have their own crime lab here in Memphis where they can handle their own DNA testing, their own ballistics testing, anything.
Speed everything up.
Yeah, hopefully speed everything up.
Yeah.
So
does the ouster move against Steve Mulroy, does that have a ripple effect? Does it cause other district attorney generals to kind of look over their shoulder and say, well, they could come after me too?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the op-ed that I wrote, is because if they can do this to Steve Mulroy, they can do it to any elected DA in the state of Tennessee. And I have been involved in politics since I was a teenager, and I've looked into this issue. I'm not aware of a DA, at least in the last 50 years, being ousted by or removed by the Tennessee General Assembly. Having prosecuted Judge Melissa Boyd, the last time we removed a judge was in 1993 approximately, and that was David Lanier out of Dyer County, who had been convicted of felonies. And the legislature, which was controlled by the Democrats at the time, and he was a Democrat, they ousted David Lanier.
Mm-hmm. So you have priorities as a prosecutor that I take it are unique to the district that you cover. You have cases that there may be more of them than there are in other parts of the state, right?
Or less. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
In my office, I prioritize violent crime. So I am violent crime driven. I want to get these cases prosecuted. I want to get them closed out as quickly, as efficiently as possible, because if you try a case, particularly a murder case, it never goes away. It'll be with that office, whether I'm the DA or I'm not, it'll be there forever. I had a case that had been tried 2 times, once in like 1995 and another time in 2000, and the Sixth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals came back and said he deserves a third trial because of a procedural error, and this was 25 years ago. Well, 10 of the witnesses were dead. So yes, you can read the prior transcript in, But given the judicial economy and the way the laws were back then, he was parole eligible because he'd already served 25 years. So we ended up having an all prosecute case because it was a case from 25 years ago, and the federal government told the state court he's getting a third trial or he is to be released.
Right. One of the phrases that Senator Taylor has used a lot is he's talked about restorative justice, what he calls schemers. Does your office work with restorative justice groups?
We don't, but I would be open. We don't work with those types of groups, but we'd be open to discussing anything we can do to reduce recidivism in the criminal justice system. Right now in Tennessee Department of Corrections, and also the Federal Bureau of Prisons, they do not have enough correctional officers to house all these inmates. And it's not that they don't have the capacity, they don't have the staffing, and they have to meet certain criteria to be able to keep the correctional officers safe. So TDOC may have 1,000 beds right now that we could, when we sentence someone to a Tennessee Department of Corrections sentence, that they could be moved into, but they don't have the workers for it to be safe and secure. So those, a lot of times now, defendants are serving their TDOC, their felony sentence in local county jails, which our Governor Bill Lee, he came out with his Governor's Criminal Justice Task Force, and that was in, I think, approximately 2020, which was a blueprint on how we can reduce recidivism in Tennessee. And one of the things we can do is get these defendants to prison because they've put a lot of resources into education, job training, drug and alcohol treatment programs, other programs to try to reduce recidivism. But if we can't get them from the county jail to the prisons, they don't get to go through those programs. Right. So if we can't fully staff our prisons, most of these defendants are going to be serving in the county jails where they don't get any opportunity to be able to go through a program that might keep them from reoffending later.
Do you think that restorative justice groups can skew the priorities that a prosecutor has in this county or area?
Well, I would have to look into that more, but what I would say is they may be able to help identify, like, if we do this, we should get a positive result. Or maybe if you tried this, this person wouldn't reoffend and cost our taxpayers $35,000 a year to keep in, whether it's a county jail or a state prison. So I'm open, and I think most prosecutors across the state would be open to discussing with anybody good policy that would help us reduce recidivism in the criminal justice system.
Let's talk about, you wrote a bit about, and it's really a big topic here in Memphis, recidivism as well as bonding, releasing the accused, releasing defendants on bond, and bond amounts that are very low. And the rule of thumb, and I think we have written about, but you're going to, I think, expand on this and correct me. The perception is that if it's a $100,000 bond, the defendant can go to a bail bond company and just put 10% down, $10,000, and they're out. In fact, it's much more complicated and in many cases a lot cheaper than 10% for someone to get out on a bond. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. It's actually not maybe as complicated as one may think. It's really the bonding industry, not only in Shelby County, but in the state of Tennessee. And I don't want to lump all bonding companies into what I'm about to say, because there are some good bonding companies out there that track their customers or the defendants, that make them pay more than what some other bonding companies. They follow the rules, and they do a good job. But bonding companies do not have to take any money from a defendant. They don't have to pay, the defendant doesn't have to pay a dime if a bonding agent wants to let someone out and they have the insurance to cover that bond, which means if they're insured for $100,000, it's typically 10 times that amount. So they can have $1 million worth of bonds circulating at one time. If they're not overextended, if they're insured, they can let you out. And if you just go Google Memphis bonding companies, they put, we also take payment plans. So if they say, well, you've got a job, Eric, but you don't have $1,000 to put down right now, but we're going to put you on a payment plan, they can let you out of jail for nothing.
That's kind of mind-blowing, I think, for a lot of people. right? And I imagine as a prosecutor, and this happens in your district as well, I assume to some
Yes.
degree. There's good ones and there's bad ones. Is it you have no control over that as the DA?
It's a contract between the bonding company and the defendant and a judge or a DA and a public defender. It's none of our business. Or a defense attorney, it's between that bonding company and that defendant.
Should it be?
I think the legislature should look at that. I mean, I'm a transparent type person, and I think it's undermining our judges. It's undermining our judicial commissioners because if they think I'm setting this, some of these judicial commissioners may not know the ins and outs of the bonding industry. So if they set a $500,000 bond, and let's say two bonding companies are insured for $250,000 apiece, and they come together to make this one bond, and this person puts down $10,000 when they should be putting $50,000 down because it's a $500,000 bond. I mean, it's totally undermining the authority of our judges. They have so much power on who gets out of jail. They have more power than the judges. They have more power than the judicial commissioners because as long as they've got the insurance and they are approved to write bonds in Shelby County or any county in Tennessee, they can let these defendants out.
How do they make money as a bonding company? I mean, what is the bonding company's incentive to do that? The payment plans that they're getting?
That and then they may get some defendants who can pay 10%.
Yeah.
So if there is a $50,000 bond and they can come up with the $5,000, if they do 4 of those a week, that's $20,000. And if you got low overhead, you're writing bonds out of your house. It looks like that to me. That might be a pretty good business model.
And then what happens to a bonding company when someone skips out? I mean, we have this notion, this TV notion that there's a bounty hunter, or I mean, like what? I shouldn't make light of this because these are very serious things. But what exactly happens if someone skips out and you go to the bonding company and say, hey, John Smith didn't show up. Where are they? What happens next?
Well, that's a great question. I addressed that in the op-ed just a little bit. So one of the policies I understand, I don't know if it was a policy or if they just started implementing this in Shelby County, was prior administrations. I don't know if it was under General Wyrick, General Gibbons, or even General Gibbons' whoever the DA was back then.
Yeah, right.
But if a defendant didn't show up and it was a case that they thought would end up in criminal court, they would just dismiss it. So if you had an attempted murder, this person didn't show up, they would just dismiss it, which totally lets the bonding company off the hook.
You mentioned that in the column. That just seems bizarre also.
Yeah, there's no accountability for the bonding company. So if they wrote a $100,000 bond and then the case gets dismissed in General Sessions, they're off the hook for that $100,000. So let's walk through. Judicial commissioner sets a $100,000 bond. Defendant pays whatever they pay, or they don't pay anything and they get out. They don't come back to court. What should happen is there should be an FTA, which is called a failure to appear. A warrant should be issued for them. Or if you're in criminal court, a capias should be issued. The General Sessions court clerk or the circuit court clerk should issue what's called a sire facis. Sire facis is a letter to the bonding companies that says you got to bring this body back to this court, and you've got 6 months. If you don't do that, if you don't produce the defendant within 6 months, then the judge can order you pay the $100,000 to the clerk, whether that's the General Sessions court clerk or that's the criminal court clerk.
That's the leverage.
Yes, but the judges, the General Sessions judges and criminal court judges have to hold the bonding companies accountable. You made the decision to let this person out on a payment plan or not pay the 10% or whatever, which they're not supposed to know that. I'm not giving you extension on the 6 months. You got today, you either pay this or your bonding privileges in Shelby County or whatever county it is are revoked. They're suspended until you pay this $100,000.
And before I go back to Bill, we have about eight minutes left here in the show. I'm fascinated by this, and we're really in the weeds, but I think it's super important because people are very focused on this. So I think you wrote in the column that Mulroy has changed the practice where he is not releasing, he's not just forgiving the bond company. He's actually saying, hey, trying to hold them accountable in more, if not all cases.
It wouldn't be Mulroy. It would be the judges. But the DA's job is to call out to say, like, hey, this person, this bonding company let this. They've made a $250,000 bond. They've not shown up. Your Honor, we want you to hold them accountable because they have not produced the defendant. And then we have to use more taxpayer resources to go look for them. U.S. Marshals, the Metro Police Department Fugitive Task Force, Shelby County Fugitive Task Force. We have to put them in NCIC, so that way if they're in another state and they get arrested or get pulled over, they know we're looking for them in Tennessee. So, these bonding companies, when they let folks out, usually we have to go find them with taxpayer resources.
Okay, we'll go to Bill.
The other thing that I wonder about is that there's been a lot of discussion here about setting a bond that is high enough that the person won't make the bond and will remain in custody. And in a lot of cases, it's because all sides on the case agree that the person should not be out. As I understand it, though, unless it's a capital murder case, some kind of bond has to be set. Am I right on that? Or?
Typically, yes, sir.
So wouldn't the simpler solution be to just say, in this case, there's not going to be a bond, even if it's not a murder
Well,
case?
there's one thing, and I really like the idea, and I'm glad that they're putting it to the voters. Speaker Sexton has a referendum proposed in 2026. It's got to pass the General Assembly this January. It's already passed one resolution, but the judges would be able to decide, Bill, Eric, you're a threat to the community. I'm holding you without bond. Mm-hmm. So, but the thing right now to do is if somebody comes in with a murder, attempted murder, rape of a child, rape, set the bond at $1 million, and the defense attorneys can file a motion to revoke bond. A motion to reduce bond, and you can have a hearing and see what kind of proof the state has, and then you can determine, whether or not that defendant should get a reduction in the bond. But they could set it right now at $5 million. It only says you have to set a bond. That's what the law is. It doesn't say how much you have to set, only that you have to set a bond.
All right, the same scenario, but with a different offense. A young person, maybe a teenager, maybe a young adult, who is breaking into cars, breaking into homes. As soon as they get out, because it's considered a relatively minor charge, they do it again, and they do it over and over and over again. At what point does that bump up against the presumption that someone is innocent until they're proven guilty?
Well, in the 28th Judicial District, if you are out on bond, in my district, if you are out on bond and you pick up new charges, unless it's public intoxication, something like that, but if you're out on DUI and public intoxication, we would likely file this. We would file a motion to revoke your bond. We would get you served, your defendant served, and we would try to get a hearing set as quickly as possible to get you in jail, to get your bond taken away until you either plead, you have a trial. So down here, they've got way more volume, hundreds more, thousands of more cases than anywhere else in the state. So I don't know how practical that is. But on certain cases, if somebody's out on an aggravated assault and they pick up a new charge, there should definitely be a motion to revoke their bond.
Is it more complex because of the presumption of innocence in making these kind of pre-trial or pre-guilty plea or the disposition of the case?
Well, the last thing we want to do is take somebody's liberty away that may be innocent. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where you really have to look at violent cases versus nonviolent cases. If somebody goes to Walmart and they steal $10 worth of whatever, we don't want them sitting in jail for 6 months. That's $35,000 a year to keep somebody in jail over stealing $10 worth of merchandise from Walmart. And that does happen from time to time. There's people who get caught up in the system and their case gets continued and they should have already gotten out. But obviously we want that person to quit stealing from Walmart, right, and try to find a way to break that cycle. But there are times where people should probably be out on the ROR. They're going to come back, released on their own reconnaissance, or maybe given a low bond because when they work their case out, it's probably going to be a suspended sentence, straight probation anyway.
Let me, with just really about a minute left here, we mentioned the legislature. I mean, it is a reminder that, and you bring this up, and we've done a lot of shows on public safety and criminal justice. The state sets most of these laws and guidelines. You all have discretion, but they aren't Shelby County commissioners or Crockett County commissioners setting these laws. So with the legislature, they're beginning planning for the next session. I mean, that stuff starts happening before the session starts in January. What's your quick wish list of things they would do that would make you feel like would make your folks safer and would just make West Tennessee safer, Tennessee as a whole safer?
Well, a couple years ago, Speaker Pro Tem Farrell Harrell in the Senate, he proposed just a comprehensive overhaul of the bonding companies, and I think that they should go and try to have some more accountability. They were wanting to set up a statewide, I think it was going to be under commerce and insurance, sort of a statewide database where they track certain things and they required training, and I thought it was a great proposal. But the bonding industry has one of the strongest lobbies in the state of Tennessee, and it's very hard to get any type of reform done with the bonding companies.
All right. Well, just leaving on that disappointing, sad note.
Yeah.
But thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for walking us through all this. We really do appreciate it. We hope to have you back sometime, and always welcome any columns from you in the Daily Memphian.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. That is all the time we have this week. Coming up next week, Tina Sullivan from Overton Park Conservancy. In the coming weeks, we also have Paul Young, Memphis Mayor, Marie Fagans, the school superintendent. But that is all the time we have this week. Go to WKNO.org or the Daily Memphian to get the full video or audio of the show. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.